This is John for Global Traveler. Today I have the pleasure of talking travel and books with Tom Turcich, author of The World Walk. Actually, you're not just the author, you're the man who did the World Walk. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you for your time. Let's jump right into it. You're reportedly the 10th person to walk around the world. Now I've listened to some interviews, found them fascinating. I love the process. Can you tell us in short a little bit how it got started?
Yeah, so yes, like you said, supposedly I'm the 10th person to walk around the world, as confirmed as that can be. When I was 17, I had a friend who passed away. She was 16, and it was just very formative for me. I had known about death intellectually, of course, and I had thought about death, for years as a kid, probably a little too obsessively. And I kind of set everything aside. I set all those thoughts of death aside as I was growing up, and kind of just went along the path that was laid out for me. And then when my friend Anne Marie died, it was this real hit that I realized, that I could die and that it could happen at any moment. And so that led me on this path and this kind of self-discovery where I started really reflecting on, okay, if I have a limited amount of time here, what do I want out of life? And ultimately I came to the answer that I wanted to travel, I wanted to be forced into adventure, and I wanted to understand the world. And then I started looking for ways to solve all those things. And eventually I found Steve Newman and Carl Bushby, these two guys who had walked around the world before. And the idea of walking around the world just lodged itself into my head. And then it was 8 years of going to school and saving and working at home and paying off loans until I was able to begin the day before I turned 26.
Now, we all get affected by tragedies. We all had bad things in our life where we wanted to get away from it or do something about it. But how did you find the courage I mean, that's a huge undertaking. How did you go from, the tragedy to actually, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, I think the tragedy was, I think, especially formative for me because, well, first it like struck me at 17, which is just a prime age for that. And you're kind of looking for answers already. And then, like I said, when I was younger, I was really kind of obsessive with this idea of death and then had to set it aside and leave it as something unresolvable. And then on top of that, Anne Marie, my friend who passed, she was the nicest person I knew, by a mile. I had grown up with her. And from a young age, I always knew she was better than me. She was kinder. She was smarter. She worked harder. And so when she died, it crumbled everything. And it left me in this really vulnerable state. And the first idea I latched onto after that was Carpe Diem. I saw Dead Poet Society, and the idea of Carpe Diem was the answer that I needed to kind of get out of this fog that I was in. And then, eventually when I came to those things that I valued, when I really thought about, okay, you have this minimal time here, what do you value? And then I discovered the World Walk. I was able to hold on to that idea, I think, because it was so rooted in these deeper things that I wanted in life. When you're a teenager, you have a lot of ideas. You have a lot of wild ideas all the time. A lot of them come and go. But the World Walk for me really resonated with just what I valued. And so whenever I thought of doing something else, it never really seemed like an option. And so just like gradually over years, it grew deeper and deeper into me as a part of my identity and as a part of how I saw my future unfolding. So that, the choices I made as I went to school and then graduated, they were all in the direction of trying to make the World Walk happen.
So how much planning, not necessarily the financial end, but what type of planning? I wouldn't even know where to begin about I'm going to walk the world. Like, how did you start? What type of planning? Were you fully prepared when you took your first steps?
No, definitely not. The planning was, I think, initially like the larger route I planned with two things in mind. With first, I wanted to hit every continent, and then it was how do I do that with as little visa trouble as possible. So, that kind of dictated my path, which is why, say in South America, I walked the West Coast rather than the East Coast down Brazil, because Brazil, you need a visa too big to, cross on foot with the amount of time you have. And then also later, why I went up into Central Asia versus through the Middle East and Southeast Asia, just easier with the visas. But yeah, when I began, I had no idea what I was doing. I had these bike maps. I remember that I thought I would follow these trails that it had laid out all the way down to Florida. And I got out of Valley Forge in Pennsylvania and onto these windy Pennsylvania roads and almost died like 3 times on them because they're hilly and windy. And I was like, all right, well, these are worthless. And then on top of yeah, and then on top of that, I'm having trouble finding a place to sleep. It's cold and rainy. I don't have the right rain gear immediately. I'm getting blisters. I'm losing toenails. I was cramping. My muscles, even though I was an athlete my whole life, my muscles weren't quite ready for 15 miles a day, or, at that time, trying to work towards 24 miles a day. They weren't ready for that much walking. So yeah, well, in the beginning, you can't really do that much planning because, you don't know what El Salvador is going to be like, or Mexico, or, Turkey until you get there. And I think wisely began in the US. And that allowed me to kind of get my bearings. And the first month, there was really a lot of kinks. But then even the first 4 or 5 months, as I made my way down to Mexico, it allowed me to kind of figure out the basics of, living out of a baby carriage and walking every day. There's little things like how much water to carry, how much food to eat, where to sleep. And so then by the time I entered Mexico, I had a good sense of the basics. And then I could really worry about, okay, now you got to survive in a new language and in a new culture and in a place you don't really fully understand.
Now, aside from stopping in a city where you've walked to, for whatever reason, friends or just to rest, whatever, did you return home at all, or was this one kind of long, continuous journey?
I returned home a few times. I got very sick from a bacterial infection after South America, and it kind of called up to me when I was in Scotland. And that forced me to go to London for a little bit. And I was in and out of infectious disease at the Royal London Hospital. And then they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So I flew home, and I was home for, I think, 4 months, maybe 5 months about, and until an antibiotic started to work and I recovered and was able to pick up the walk. And then I also stopped, well, briefly because of COVID, I got stuck in Azerbaijan for 5 months. And so that slowed me down for a little bit. And then I flew home very briefly during COVID when I was in Turkey to get the jab. So I flew home for like 3 days, got the J&J jab, flew back, and then was able to get into Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. So there's only a few times that I returned home.
Now, obviously, you had a change of clothes, et cetera, et cetera. But I've run a lot of marathons, and I know what happens to shoes. How did you deal with shoes? Like, did you have a bunch of in stock, or did you order them as you needed them? How did you get your hands on them then?
In the beginning, I was just getting whatever shoes kind of that were in the shop wherever I was,
Oh,
and it was giving me a lot of blisters. And it was not a good idea because they're not fitting just right. And I'm walking asphalt as well, so it's like hard on the foot. I'm walking tens of thousands of steps every day. And so I had this really bad pair of shoes in Costa Rica where it was 100 degrees, 100% humidity, super hot. My feet were swelling like crazy. And I basically had to cut these shoes open until they were like sandals. And
wow.
I lost, I think, 5 toenails at that time. It was just like my feet were a disaster going through there. And then at that point, I decided, okay, like I need to find a pair that I'm going to use consistently. I had a friend who worked, or he still does work for Brooks, and he sent me a pair of Cascadias. And then from then on, they fit great, and I didn't get any blisters with them. My feet didn't move around much, and so he would send them ahead, to wherever I was going to be in Bogota or Lima or whatever. And sometimes it meant going a long time without a new pair of shoes, but I would rather do that and like have these shoes really destroyed than switching into shoes that didn't fit. So I pretty much wore Brooks Cascadias for the entire length of the walk.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. I understand why. Of all the places you've been, obviously around the world, was there any that really surprised you?
Yeah, a few of them. I think Turkey was probably the first that really, well, there's a bunch, but yeah, Turkey was very surprising. I think in particular because when I was in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, they're all Ottoman states at one point, and they have the Star and Crescent on their flags. And when I was in them, I had police escorts in every country.
Oh, wow.
only for a little bit at the end of Morocco, and only well, actually, and then for the length of it, for the duration of my time in Algeria and Tunisia. And it was really nice at first because I had, kind of like these local guides with me who could tell me, oh, like here's a good restaurant to eat at, or, help me get into a
Cool.
hotel, kind of thing. And when I got to Turkey, I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is a very wide country. I'm going to be here for probably 90 days for almost the length of my visa. And I'm going to have a police escort the whole time because I'm seeing the star and crescent on the flag and I'm associating that with these police escorts that I had. And then I got into Turkey and it was fantastic. And I didn't have a police escort. It was one of the most peaceful, beautiful, enjoyable places to walk that I covered in my journey around the world. And so I think that was a surprise just because my expectations were so subverted with this police escort. But it happened a bunch of times. I remember even in like Peru, like early on, 2 years in or so, less than 2 years in, thinking that I'll get to Peru and it'll be so wild and kind of untamed and so different. And then you get there and it's just people living, eating, hanging out with their family like anywhere else. So yeah, it kind of happened over and over again.
And when you were making the walk or before the walk or during the walk, did you plan on writing the book or did that happen naturally did the thought come to you naturally as you were doing it?
No, yeah, I did plan on writing a book. I wasn't sure exactly what form it would take, but I really discovered writing right after college. And I had written a bunch of bad science fiction novels and just for the fun of it, and wrote and read, probably 40 books on writing. I used to spend my days in the library just kind of writing and reading. So I really enjoyed that. And I knew there would be a story in the World Walk. There's a million stories, but, there's definitely one that's worth a book. And so when I was walking, I kept very detailed journals. And every day I would write down some little detail of wherever I was because I knew that would be useful later, be something I wouldn't remember, be too small and peculiar probably to recall. And so I wrote down these little details, which helped writing the book. But yeah, I always had it in my head that I would write something.
So then in the process of writing the book, did you learn anything? Did you learn anything from your travels while you were writing the book, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think so, honestly. I think, with the walking, I already had so much time to spend with myself. And especially on the last leg when I walked from Seattle back to New Jersey, and I kind of detached from, social media and taking videos and doing anything really. I was just walking very purely. you know, I was just spending time with myself and reflecting on, my influences and the walk and how the walk affected me and how it changed me. And I had done that for so long. By the time I got to writing the book, my whole focus on the book was just let's just try and make this entertaining for the reader, and let's try and give the reader the best representation of the walk that I can, to have them kind of experience the growth that I went through. So yeah, I don't know if I like learned anything in particular. I had a lot of enjoyable moments where I would go back through my journals or I'd go back through Google Earth, Google Street View, and I'd have, the whole day would come flooding back. It would be like a flashback. So that was really enjoyable. But like a larger thing, I maybe it just reinforced that I really enjoyed writing.
Okay. Now, a part of your walk that I haven't mentioned yet, I should, because it leads into my next question. Aside from the World Walk book, you've also written other books about Savannah's world of adventure.
Hmm.
I, you have my condolences on the passing of Savannah. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Savannah, I adopted in Austin, Texas after 4 months of walking in the US and sleeping in strange places and meeting some odd people and realizing how nice it would be to have a dog that could listen while I slept. And she was just a puppy when I adopted her. And that first month we spent together was me training and kind of getting her ready for the road. And we walked down from Houston down into Mexico. And then from then on, like when we got into Mexico, she was walking the full 24 miles a day with me. And so from Mexico on, she walked every step with me, every mile. And the idea behind adopting a puppy, I remember being in this adoption center and looking at all these dogs and not really connecting with any of them. And then I was about to leave, and then they brought Savannah and her sister in, who they found on the side of the highway. And I was like, this is crazy to like adopt a puppy. You know, it's going to be such a pain and I'm going to have to train her and she's tiny and scared of the world. But the benefit is that she would grow up on the road and she would know no other life but a life on the road. And so, you know, ultimately that bore out and she was like perfectly adapted to the road and to walking 24 miles a day every day. And she loved it. She had way more energy than I did. I was exhausted at the end of every day, and she's like still wanting to play and run around. So she was a beast. But yeah, I wrote Savannah's World of Adventure, Crossing the Andes. It's the beginning of a series. It's illustrated by my mother, who's a professional illustrator, which works in my favor. And yeah, it's this great little children's book about our a true story of us when we were crossing the Andes, and I collapsed at 15,000 feet. And we're working on a second one, hopefully be out in this spring about Kyrgyzstan. But yeah, I really enjoy that as well, and hoping make an enjoyable series to kind of give the world and give the world and kind of show the world to kids and these places that you might not hear about otherwise.
Yeah, that's such a great concept because, like I said, it's places that kids don't ordinarily think about or possibly even know. And you're presenting it to them in their format and something they can understand in a really likable, enjoyable fashion. I just think it's a fantastic concept. And I love the story about the dog. Again, I'm sorry for your loss, but it's a brilliant tribute to her as well.
Appreciate that. Yeah, yeah. And you know, what better character for to travel with, you know, for these kids than a friendly dog.
Exactly. So what's next for you aside from, continuing the Savannah series?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm doing public speaking. I've been doing that for a little over 2 years now, motivational speaking, and I really enjoy that. I think before the walk, I would have felt like such a fraud doing that. You know, it's like,
Okay.
what do you have to say? But you know, now that I walked for 7 years and saw all these different cultures and spent all this time with myself and had a lot of time to reflect on things, you know, there's things that I believe in and that I believe will make people's lives better. So I really enjoy that. You know, when I speak to sales teams, it's like particularly effective. They kind of go crazy for it. So I enjoy that. I'll keep doing that, and I'll probably keep writing. You know, there's no money in writing, but I really enjoy. I really enjoy it. I get a lot of satisfaction from it. It's very difficult work, and it's fun to craft things. But really, this is kind of the first time since I was 17 that I haven't had a really pinpoint focus to aim on. You know, it was the World Walk for
Sure.
16 years. And then it was the book, it was the memoir for the past 2 years. And now this is the first time where I'm kind of looking for what the next thing is. So I'm still feeling it out.
Well, you've certainly earned the right to kind of explore what you want to do next. Before I let you go, as a world traveler, could you give us one or two of your travel tips?
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure. I would say, well, first, I would just say go. I mean, I'll travel. You know, I think people get reluctant they overthink things and try and make it perfect before you begin. I think the best thing you can do is just begin and get out there and, and kind of take the world for what it is and trust in your ability to learn and adapt and make mistakes, but then, grow from them. So I think if you have reluctance on traveling, I think just go and just begin, pick anywhere on the map and get out there. And people are the same everywhere. People are pretty nice everywhere. You'll be good in that way. And then let's see. The other thing I would say is try and get off like the beaten path. I think it's just very easy to kind of fall into the same touristy spots and even in places where you feel like maybe you're off of the tourist track, I'd say even push beyond that and go out into the villages or go into some country that is really less explored. It gives you a much more authentic feel for a place and one that isn't catered to you. And I think in that way, when you get to those places where they're not catered to tourists, it gives you a much better understanding of the world and how people actually live. When you're in a touristy spot, you're seeing the glossed over version. And that's great for a vacation. Of course, there's benefit in that. But I think the real benefit of traveling is going somewhere and then allowing that place to change you. And for that to happen, you really should be somewhere that's kind of not glossed over at all and presents something closer to reality.
Perfect advice from a man who's traveled the world. So before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find out more information about you and your books, both the World Walk and Savannah's series.
Yeah, you should be able to get the World Walk memoir pretty much anywhere. It's selling well. It's getting great reviews. People are very happy with it, so you should be able to order it to if it's not at your Barnes and Noble already. It can be or should be. You can order it on Amazon. My Instagram is the World Walk, and if you want to, you can scroll back through the whole journey. There's some beautiful photographs in there. The whole journey is kind of photographed and microblogged day by day. So that's a cool way to experience the world as well. And then my website, if you're interested in bringing me on to do some motivational speaking, is tomturcich.com. So that's the whole lot of it.
Tom, really, it's been a pleasure. I when I read about your journey and around the world, I thought it was amazing. I thought it took a lot of courage to go out there and travel the world like that. And then the secondary is Savannah's story too. The whole thing is such a beautiful story, and it encouraged everyone to travel, and that's really what it's all about. So I appreciate your time, and I encourage everyone to check out your books.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Tom.
See ya.